All right, welcome to another episode of Let's Know Buffalo. I'm Joe Sorrentino here with Kevin McMullen, and we're here with the co-founder of 360 Views, who are the premier real estate photography company, videography company, and also they've been getting into professional headshots, weddings, but I have to say, these are the people who truly set the standard for what real estate photography is, because they came into this space and blew everybody away. And now we're seeing all these other companies come out and they're offering, photography, videography services, but nobody can ever take away the fact you guys set the standard for what not only agents expect, but buyers looking online expect to see with real estate photography. So thank you so much for being here.
That's a great intro. I appreciate it.
That's all the time we have today.
That's a great intro. And I think we've had you say that when we did our testimonial video, and that's still
you know what? I appreciate that, but it's the same as right now. Yeah. Like, this was just literally off the cuff because it's the absolute truth, because I'll never forget you guys were kids. Yeah. And the quality of what you came out with blew my mind and everybody's mind. And I was just like, look at what these kids are doing. This is incredible. That was a long time ago now.
Yeah, I think timing was a huge factor in that, and what we did and kind of brought something new to Buffalo, at least. It was out there and it was being done around the country and around the world, and we saw an opportunity where nothing was really going on in Buffalo for that. And with us being younger and in college and up to date with more technology and, with drones and all those types of things, we kind of just saw white space and jumped on it.
Well, that's what I always loved about your story from talking to you, and shout out to Jordan Shinta.
Yes, sir.
Does he say Shinta or Sinta?
He says both.
I say Shinta.
Yeah.
I would say Sinta.
What I loved, though, and this is not a knock, I love the fact that you guys didn't come from a photography background.
Yeah.
You came as two young entrepreneurs that, like you saw an opportunity in the space, and then educated yourself on the software, the equipment, the techniques behind doing it. So take us back to the beginning. How did this start?
Well, Jordan and I and a couple other buddies, like since middle of college, probably even high school days, would always go to my mom's basement, whoever's basement we were in, because we all grew up, like we have a core group of guys, and we all grew up in the same neighborhood, and that's a really cool, childhood that we had. And so we were always together, always talking, and, a few of us, as we got older, we're always thinking about, what are we going to do? Like, we don't want, normal jobs, so to speak. So what are we going to do? And that got, more prevalent as we were in college, early days. And we were always talking like, what do we do? What can we do? Ideas, whiteboards. We were just pitching ideas and just hanging out, watching, whether it was hockey, football, whatever it was always like, but what are we going to do with our lives? Like those types of conversations.
I'm curious, before that, what did you see as a child that you had it even in your head that we're going to come up with some other way to make it?
I don't know. I think it was just our mindset. Like, even growing up, we just always kind of looked at ourselves as a little different, just when maybe it was that age where kids were talking and thinking about girls and drinking, and, we all did as well a little bit, but it was more about just hanging out as a group and hanging out like, all right, where are we watching the games tomorrow? Like, we wouldn't go out on Saturdays or like try to find the high school parties as much, because we were focused on the 1:00 football games and like our fantasy. And like, so we were kind of just more like into that, like hanging out and just doing our own thing and like not being a part of like societal norms, as weird as that sounds. But that was just kind of always what we thought about. And same thing with like our degrees. And I remember just being like, I was always questioning, like my friends were like, I'm getting a business degree. I'm like, so what are you going to do though? Sure. Like, what does that mean? And they were like, I don't know. I'm like, exactly. So like, let's start thinking. And I was always 2 years older than all my friends. So I kind of maybe brought a little bit more of that, I don't know if you'd call it wisdom at that age, but more of that, like questioning everything that they were doing. Is like,
right.
Why are you going to go hang out with these random girls when we could hang out tonight as guys.
My wife is
you know.
gonna love this episode.
It was, I know, but we really were like that. And it was more just questioning everything. That's kind of when I realized.
I think it's really cool because it almost sounds like it was like a gang mentality. That,
Right.
Like, you weren't interested in like, hey, I'm going to go off to college and do this thing.
Right.
It was like, hey, this is our group. Like, how could we all
Right.
like continue this, like all working together, but being productive and like making it.
Yeah, it was always just like, how could we, why? Like, why is that the case? Why? Like, we just question, like, why is 16 the age that you could get your license? Like, we just always questioned why,
I think
why?
as an entrepreneur, right? Good entrepreneurs or anybody that wants to be, instinctively, you have
Yeah.
those questions deep inside you.
Genuine
to
curiosity.
Not go with the grain, go against the grain, think outside the box, think differently. And especially when you're young and aggressive, I love young, aggressive entrepreneurs that are willing to dip their toe in almost anything and try something once. Because you never know what you're going to get out of it.
Exactly.
And especially with the change in technology. And, maybe further in the episode, I'd be curious on what the future looks like with AI in your business, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because I've already seen some photographers freaking out online about AI and shitting all over pictures because X, Y, and Z, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's why I think the name is always perfect too. Like when Jordan and I were starting with coming up with ideas for the name, logo, there's a lot of people that probably would have had a T&J photography or, you know what I mean? Tony Jordan photography. But we always were like, it's not about us. It's going to be about more technology. It's going to be, and, still to this day, it hasn't even caught up to, I think, our full name, like 360 Views. It was always supposed to be just 360 stuff, really. And then that's, that with AI and augmented reality and VR, like all that is still so brand new to the world and everyday, usage, where I think it's only going to grow into fitting the name even more. But we don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but we've always been testing and.
Well, and you got to continue to grow and adjust based on the world and the clients and the need. So where was that light bulb that said, hey, let's go with this and run? Because I think that, again, you must have been trying or doing somewhere where you're like, okay, we've got something here.
So our first
before
idea.
you say that, let me just set the stage in real estate at the time. Because you officially found it was in 2017.
2017.
So from what I remember, in 2016, which actually that was the year we did our first deal together, professional photography was just starting in the real estate world in Western New York.
Yeah, there was about, I think, one or two people that were really doing it.
Though there was like one that was actually like an architectural photographer. The other were maybe wedding photographers, people who do portraits. They just happen to have a good camera.
Right.
And so that's like where, from the agent's perspective, it was like, oh, instead of my camera, this person has a better camera. Maybe we're going to use that. Yeah. So there was just starting to see what else could be out there.
That's what was crazy to me. It was like the technology of the camera phones were not even close to as good as they are today. And there were people, I guess, were still using their phones.
Oh, yeah.
So that was the light bulb to me. It was always like, that's very weird. Like, I don't know. But going back to like the light bulb idea of like how it started is our first idea was, we were potentially going to do basically what DoorDash is now. And there was no such thing. Like I had an idea of doing groceries for people and then delivering it to their home. And, when you have a bunch of guys around and you're pitching ideas, I remember like a couple of my friends were like, that's terrible idea. Why would people just would go to the grocery store and pick it up themselves? Like people wouldn't pay for that. And I was like, I don't know. I think there's something in people just doing that. Like people just taking while they're at work, they order it. And then, there's an online website where you could check butter, milk, all the things, and we get it. And then by the time they're home, or maybe an hour after they're home, it's there for them. I don't know, but
we use it.
That was an idea.
We're so busy with work, and
my mindset is people are always gonna not want. People are always, in my opinion, as society goes, people are gonna want to do less and less. It's just why
hit the easy button. Right. How do you make somebody's life easier?
Right. And I saw that when I was doing landscaping. because every single tool, I realized every single tool, for the most part, your basic landscaping, they sell. Like at Home Depot and Lowe's, like you could just go and buy it and do it. But why do people, and why are so many landscaping businesses so profitable, is because they just do that work for them. Like the spring cleanups, you need a rake, you need some bags, you need a little hedge trimmer, and you need mulch, and a couple shovels, and you could do it. It's going to take you maybe a full day if it's yourself. But so that was like a light bulb to me. It was like, okay, people, the tools are out there. People don't care about that. People just want it done. They'll pay for it, especially if it's a good service and someone treats them right. So
yeah,
that was what made me fall in love with the service business, is just anything service. And that's when Jordan and I started doing landscaping. So I worked for Greenview and did that for a full summer and learned kind of everything on spring cleanups. And I just left them the following summer and told Jordan, like, we could do this. Just, I'll teach you everything. And me and him just started calling all of our friends, parents, putting on Facebook. And in 1 to 2 summers, we were packed, every single day, every morning.
How old were you?
This was like 2 years before. So I was probably, 17, 18,
That's
19,
awesome.
That era. And Jordan was a couple of years younger. And I had Jordan had a Ford Focus. I had a Toyota Corolla. So we had to borrow Jordan's uncle's truck every single day. We'd go to his house, pick it up, go to Lowe's. We were doing mulch bags at that time. So it wasn't so we were just, it was crazy. But that was when we learned we didn't want to work for anyone else. Because we were doing that, we were making good money, and it wasn't a real business really. So people were paying us cash. We were young, but
once you get a taste of working for yourself, there's
Yeah.
literally no going
and we had
back.
no expenses. So
Right.
that was probably the most,
Yeah.
the
And as a couple
wealthiest I
17,
was,
18-year-olds, it's
because I was
having a little bit
swimming in
of
it.
cash in your pocket.
Right.
It's like, this is great.
And it was the most satisfying thing was to wake up, see, a terrible landscape, clean it up, fix it up, leave, have the cash. And we were just cash guys. We loved going to the bank and putting it in the bank, M&T, and just boom, every single day it was a deposit. And we were just starting to save. And that was when we started to fall in love with saving and growing an account. And we didn't know what to do with the money, but it was cool just to see the number go up in the account.
Wow.
So we were saving like 80% of what we were making because we were just trying to, like, how much do you have in your savings? Like, we were looking at each other like, all right, well, shit, you have like, you have $800. All right, I'm going to put 1,000 in. Like, all right, this job, I'm going to put 600 in. So it was kind of like a battle between us, being competitive, is like who could have more in their savings at the end of this summer. So
Who won?
I don't remember. Jordan's usually a little bit better with it. I think I had a girlfriend the whole time and he didn't, so he was able to save a little bit
He
more.
had more expenses than me.
Yeah, so a couple more dinners. But no, so that was what it was. But then we realized we didn't want to get into plowing. We didn't want to do any of that. So we had our normal jobs. Jordan worked at Delta Sonic and I worked at Consumers during the winter. And that was when we were in college and just kind of going through the phases and, whatever. But then I saw this. It was actually, shout out to Adam Russell, who's one of our employees, obviously the manager in Buffalo now, but he was the one who was always on technology. Like he was always showing me stuff, like whether it was YouTubers that were coming up or artists that were coming up, and just, he was always putting me on. He's always like, he's in the weeds on the internet. And so he saw this one YouTuber who had a 360 video for the first time. I think it was in like 2015, 16. He showed me this video and we were watching him vlog, but you could scroll around on YouTube. You could scroll around to see what was behind him, to the side of him. And he was showing off this camera, this vlogger. And I was watching it. And I was like, he's like, take a look at this. And I was watching it. The first thing I thought of was real estate. I don't know why. He just showed it to me. He was like, this is cool. Look at this. And I instantly said, this is how people should watch, look and shop for houses. First thing I thought of, I went and bought the camera, and
Wow.
it was like $400 at the time. And I bought it and I showed my uncle who was working at Antali. And I was like, hey, could we do a couple model homes? He's like, hey, if you buy the camera, I'll give you 2 model homes and basically pay back you for the camera. And we'll just see if Ange Natali likes it. And we did it. And my uncle thought it was cool, but Ange didn't love it. and it wasn't really, the technology wasn't made for real estate then yet for that camera.
Yeah.
It was just a startup idea kind of thing. Like, this camera's cool, but it had no real function to bring value to people in the real estate industry. So I put the camera down because there was no way to look how it is now at 360 photos. So, yeah, I put it down. We did the landscaping thing. And then I remember seeing a Facebook post where somebody posted for the first time a 360 photo. And I don't know if you guys remember that, but that was popular. Like, right as 2016, 2017 was starting, there was like 360 photos that you could put it on Facebook. And so I was like, okay, let's revisit this, and revisited it. I looked online, and there was finally like a website where you could import all the 360 photos, drag them all in after the shoot, and then it would build your, your 360 model. But you'd have to put each one manually. So if you took the first photo at the front of the house, you'd have to click, be like, okay, this is where the next photo goes. So you would have to build it manually out. So it took me like 2 hours to do one house tour with full 360. Wow. But at least there was a software out there that was working with it. So that was when we really started going, and that was pretty much like where the idea started. And I remember showing it to Ange again and my uncle, and again, they just didn't really want to touch it yet. They just thought it was, made them dizzy. They didn't like the idea. They were a little bit more old school with, marketing, so they didn't like it. And then I remember I met this one kid out at a college party, and I was talking to him about what I wanted to do. I wanted to get into real estate. Some way I just wanted to be around houses too. That was kind of another reason why we went into that aspect is, I just loved houses. I loved new builds. I loved being inside homes, and how could I work inside of a home instead of in an office?
Sure.
So I showed this kid, and he was like, my dad flips houses, blah, blah, blah. So I ended up, I was drunk at this college party, and I remember getting this kid's, dad's number, and I called him in the morning. I just followed up with him. I'm like, hey, I met your son last night, like, blah, blah, blah. And I go downtown, I meet him, and the first thing he says, he's like, I don't flip houses. Like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, oh my God, dude, like, okay. And then he's like, my son, my other son does. And I'm sitting there still like, okay, like whatever. Like, and he's like, he's over, he's next door in his office. Why don't you go meet him and show him? So I'm like, why not? I went up and showed him, and that was really the start of it. And that was Nick Giambra. And that was how it started. And he was more of a forward thinker, I think, as well at the time. And he was like, yeah, this is sick. Like, well, actually, he told me to go and do a test run at one of his houses that he had on the market. Mm-hmm. And so I did the whole thing, sent it to him. And he's like, I like this, but I need photos too. Like, I don't want to, and he was more of the mindset of like thinking in a system already. He's like, I don't want to hire you and the photographer. Right. Real estate moves too quick for that.
And you hadn't even thought.
I didn't even know. Right? No, I had no idea that you needed photos for a listing. I had no idea. I'm like, this is cool for houses. Like, let's sell it. And he's like, well, I need to hire you and the photographer, and that's going to be a pain. So like, if you learn how to take photos, I'll hire you guys. And that was when I brought Jordan in from the, the conversations, how much, how close we were as friends, and obviously working together with landscaping. I'm like, dude, if you learn photos, I'll learn how to perfect this 360 thing, and we could have something here to at least do in the winter. Summer, we were still going to do landscaping.
Yeah.
And so then that grew, and Jordan, it's crazy because Jordan was actually dating a girl at that time, and her dad lived in New Jersey as a real estate photographer.
Oh, man.
And so like he barely even knew that. And I had no idea that was the case. And so he started talking, whatever, and all of a sudden he's giving us ideas. He's telling us what cameras, he's telling us like flash, he's telling us all these crazy different things and like tips and tricks and like getting us in there. So like we had somebody to at least ask some questions to.
Right. And
so Jordan, he learned it all, and it just grew. And obviously from there it blossomed, and we were terrible at photos at the first, like I remember going to Kristen Bishop's office, and she was like crushing it at the time then. And she was, the person to be like, to get as far as a client, I remember. And she liked her stuff, but I forget that someone she was working with just hated our photos. Like, just, they were too zoomed in. We weren't using the right lens. It was too dark. We weren't getting the right angles, just ripped us apart. And I
bit of growing
remember,
pains?
yeah, I remember just being like, all right, like, it's not personal, Joe. Like, we were just learning business at a young age, nothing personal. Like, let's just figure out how to do better. Like, let's save up, let's get a better lens. Like, maybe she's right. It was never like, you know, no, our photos are good. Like, trust me. So it was
That's the
always
worst
just,
thing you can do, right?
Right.
You got to listen to the feedback of your client and say, all right, let's look ourselves in the mirror. How do we fix this?
Right. Every obstacle thus far, like, you don't do photos, like, okay, let's learn photos.
Right.
Your photos are good. All right, let's do it. I love that every obstacle, you took it as an opportunity to grow the business.
And a lot of people too, like younger entrepreneurs or just people, whoever is starting out to be an entrepreneur now, like they hear these stories and they think it's like, you know, I don't know, like we questioned it. Like when he said like do photos, I was pretty hard like, no, I'm not doing photos. Our whole point is to be different. Our whole point is to be the guys that are not doing what the old. So like it was like a week and a half of going through mentally like, should we do it? Should we not? Like, so it's never as easy as like, all right, yes, like, all right, wake up. I work 20 hours a day. All right, like there's always going to be ebbs and flows and like decisions you have to make. But yeah, it was ultimately, we were like, yes, like, I guess we should have. And that was what's great about Jordan is he's always a little bit more optimistic, like looking forward on that, where I'm always kind of seeing where the cracks in the foundation are, like, you know, those types of things. So I think always having a partner, especially if you're starting out at a young age, is good because you could kind of battle those mental demons early and you could have somebody to talk to and converse with. Like it doesn't move as quickly in a lot of ways, and you know.
No, but at least you have somebody there to play devil's advocate.
Exactly.
Right? You know, the worst partnership you can have is two similar people that do the same thing. Well, what do you both bring to the table? Right. You both bring something to the table, and you know, whether it's business or personal relationships, i.e. your wife, right? Like, my wife and I are very different. Yeah,
exactly. And that's why a lot of like husband-wife businesses do so well, because you have the husband who's really good at X, Y, and Z, and you have the wife who looks at life and business completely differently. And, you know, so that's always good. I always like having somebody there. And, you know, people always ask me, why did you make Jordan a part? You know, why? Like people were like wondering why I was doing that. Like even some people in my own family were like, why? Like, why don't you just have him as a, you know, because I didn't care. We didn't care about that. Like we don't care about percentage of the company when you're that young. And I didn't care. I was like, all right, if he's just as invested as I am, then that's going to be a win for me. You know, I don't want to be the only guy at night worrying about all this. Like I want to be able to worry about it together. Like I don't want to be the only one. Right. So that was kind of what we did, and we just kept growing and growing, and that was kind of the start.
And just the sheer luck that his girlfriend at the time had an uncle who was doing this in another state.
Her dad.
Yeah. That's crazy. Just so crazy to me.
It's wild how the stars align.
Right. Yeah, because if you didn't have that person to bounce ideas off of, I wonder, like, do you think it would have grown the same way? Because
I mean, we were doing a ton of research on our own, like YouTube, you know, research and finding things. And like we took what he said, but we also like he was very old school with a lot of the stuff. And that was where we learned like, okay, like he's doing it this way, but I found this guy on YouTube who's doing it a little differently.
Because it's just interesting to me, like I was saying at that time, there was no one here that you could look at to be like, hey, look at what they're doing. Like, nobody.
Well, that's something that I don't care what industry you're in. In Buffalo, we're always two steps behind the rest of the world. If something's happening in California,
100%.
like it's going to take 3 or 4 years before that trend gets to Buffalo.
Like you just got to realize that. And like that's what I saw was these companies that were doing it in Las Vegas and Miami and LA, but no one was doing it for those like smaller sub-cities yet.
Yeah,
nobody. So that was where we're like, all right, like. And that was around the time, too, a lot of our friends were leaving for college or moving away. And we were, you know, I was always just like ripping on them. Like, you know, Buffalo still has so much potential. Like, this is a spot to be right now. Like, we have so much to grow. That was a huge
problem before our sort of renaissance over the last 10 years is the young professionals after college were leaving Buffalo and they weren't coming back.
No, they wanted
to all this talent that Buffalo nurtured and had. We left, or they left, because of opportunity.
Right. And it's sad because, you know, there's so much to grow here, and there still is a ton, obviously, but like that was a huge thing. I remember looking it up and seeing all those companies that were doing. And the cool thing about our industry, and we were able to connect with some of like the big players in the space in the country because there were so few of them. Like there was seriously maybe like 20 in the whole country that were doing what we were doing before us in the whole country.
Yeah.
And there was a few in Canada that we actually linked up with. There was one in St. Catharines. I remember going to them and linking up with them, and you know what they're doing now. They're doing all of the real estate videos for Ryan Serhan, all of the $1 million listing people in LA. Like, so they'll do what we do, but instead of the volume based business that we do, they're doing it like they'll fly to California to do a $20-30 million home. Then they'll fly back to the Hamptons, and then they'll go to Miami. They do the biggest houses in the country.
That's wild.
And they work with the best agents in the country.
That was somebody that was just a
and we still are connecting, and we still like we golfed in Florida, you know, not too long ago, and we still are getting ideas from them, and we have their number and whatnot. So it's cool to see us bounce around similar obstacles. But that was too another thing is we had no one like there was no one really on YouTube that says like, hey, do this this is how you do a real estate photography business. Like It was before we started it was just like freelance photographers like you said who were doing it, and they kind of were they were shooting the photos, they were editing at night, and then they would, that's why they were booked out for 2 weeks because they still had to edit. They could only do 4 or 5 houses a day at max. So
that was the thing that blew my mind when you guys came in, because you learned technology that was there that other people in that space just didn't learn it. And so you were able to do what they could do and do it literally 10 times faster. Yeah. Like the ability to turn around and edit the photos, even the way you had your camera settings. Yeah. Like when you're doing your multiple exposures and it's automatic, like that was something I would watch photographers sit there
with the flash
and play with the right, try to find the right, what do you call it? Exposure. Yeah. And it would take settings. The photos would take forever. Right. Just because they didn't have it set up the same way you did. So that would just blew my mind. Like you came in and your service, not only was the quality the best, but you were able to do it faster for less money and get the photos back sooner. It was like, what? Where did these guys come from?
I think one of the things that I've always been impressed with is when you guys built out the website, right? And the ease of going on there and not having to call somebody and then flip through their calendar. Right. It's like, here's the schedule, here's our packages, and it's a step-by-step, boom, you're out. Right.
I got to say, so like a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago, there at our office meeting at Keller Williams, they had a photographer come in and talk to everybody. And, I'm sure he's a nice guy and a good photographer. But one of the pitches he was saying is like, when you text your photographer and they don't get back to you for a whole day, or, they're not available, do you have that problem? And me and Katie looked at each other like, no. We go right on your website, boom, boom, boom. And it's so simple
or
to
you
schedule.
Have at least a bunch of people to talk to, and on the company side of it, whether it's me, Jordan, Adam, AJ, like any of the photographers, like if you have their number, usually somebody's going to get back to you.
Yeah, we've never had a problem with scheduling ever.
But that was like our big thing too, is one, the opportunity of doing photos. It's a white space, introducing drones to Buffalo was like crazy idea. Like people had no idea what a drone was in Buffalo. And so when we were going to pitch people on these things, like people were calling them droids. And, I remember our old accountant, I was like, you guys still working with those blimps? Like he literally called them blimps. Like he had no idea. Like
I remember it was very early on in my career, I had a $1 million listing over at like Main and Hopkins, right? Just behind the Buffalo Country Club. And it was right by the airport. Yeah. So the drone would go up and immediately it would come back down. So Jordan is like taking it up, snapping pictures, and then it's being grounded again. Yeah, I know. And this was before I think you even had to have any licensing or anything like that.
This was years before.
But we kept fighting the FAA regulations over there by the airport.
I remember doing that a few times too. Like it'll come down.
Yeah, you got like 10, 15, 20 seconds, whatever the number was. It'd go up, get some pictures, come back down. And I kept doing it.
I know. It's cool. But like our whole thing was, all right, how do we build a system around this now? Like, okay, this is cool, but especially as Jordan and I started to get busier and busier, it was like, okay, how do we build a system? How do we make it better? It was just always more. And that's just, I guess, what the competition beforehand and people just didn't do was think of photography for real estate as a business.
Right.
Now they do. And now you go on YouTube, here's how to make $1 million real estate photography business.
Right.
Well, and I think
show
if you
the
want to
steps.
scale any business, I don't care what industry you're in, if you don't have systems
Right.
in place and you're
100%.
perfecting them and adjusting them,
Yeah.
you don't have a business.
Exactly.
Right?
So
You've got a
we
hobby.
were exactly. And that's when we realized, okay, like that was when we first were hiring for the first time. We were like, okay, we have a job. Like I remember Jordan and I, we wanted to take a vacation, like go somewhere. Like, we're starting to get busy and it's, we were getting a little crazy with going all night and all day and starting, and it was just us. And the person to call was us, to book us. Everything was just us. And I remember we wanted to go on vacation and we were like, we felt guilty because we're taking money out of our own pockets just because if we close our calendars, no one could book for the couple days. And that was when we realized we built a cool job for ourselves. We didn't have a business yet.
Sure.
And that was when we started implementing, our first hire, which was Adam. And he opened it up where he was doing the editing and he was doing a lot of the back end, like admin work, and he was just hanging out at the office. So at least, he could take a little pressure off us as far as editing during the day and turning sending the photo. Because Jordan and I would drive around with hotspots, and as soon as, we would finish a quick edit or whatever, we would have to like sit there and try to send it before we would drive to the next appointment.
Oh my God.
It was a nightmare. And
Oh my
we were just
God.
trying to stay up to date on the demand. But yeah, we had him come in and he was, a game changer as far as opening our eyes and be like, okay, we could do all the stuff he's doing probably faster, but he gives, we're basically paying for time. And that was another thing, huge thing mentally, like light bulb was like, okay, the more people, like you could be doing that and you could keep more of the money, but you're just paying somebody else to have time back.
Sure.
And that was a big thing because, again, no one in the industry had an admin. It's still not many people of our competitors have that. So, and then it grew into Adam he was like, I want to get in the photos now. Like I'm editing all these videos and I'm talking to these clients and whatever on the email. Like, what you guys do looks fun. Like, let me get in there. And we were like, I don't know, like we need an admin. So he found somebody because he used to work at Wegmans and he was a good friend of ours in the neighborhood type of, same group. So I remember him just, texting me, or I was texting him. I'm like, hey, how much to quit Wegmans and work for us? And I think at the time he was like $300 a week and I'll quit. And I remember saying like, we can't afford that yet, but like soon enough we will. And I think like 4 months later, we were like, all right, we could do 300 a week. Quit. You got to quit tomorrow though. And he did. And ever since then, he's been with us. So it's cool to see that evolution of him knowing all the clients as well and him building the business with us and seeing things. And he's just another third head that comes into meetings and, gives his opinions on what clients might want or what he sees from people and all that stuff. And then when he got into the industry of started to shoot and edit and do all that with us, he was just as crazy. And so then we had to hire, an admin, just a sole admin that would never want to do shooting and that never wanted to get into that and just doing that. And that's, basically when AJ came into the picture and, he was running crazy, working 7 days a week for 3 years, to the point where we finally got him some breathing room. And, we hired Micah to do weekends, and AJ still kind of is involved on weekends, but, not full time on weekends. So that was something that we always wanted, was for our clients, was to have somebody that they could call, at least leave a voicemail, email, and then they could, get a call back relatively soon and get their edits fixed or whatever it is just running it like a business and treating it like a business from the beginning to the end.
Well, and some of the hardest things to do when you're growing a business is working on your business and not in it. You're in the field every day and you're doing the pictures and the videos. It's like, well, how do I build the company? How do I hire somebody? Obviously you've done a great job because as you've grown, you've been able to adjust and adapt.
And what was cool about in Buffalo and the people of Buffalo, and you guys specifically, I remember being at shoots, and I know Jordan was too, because we've had conversations, where we would be at the shoots and talking to you guys, getting advice, or you guys were, asking questions like, how are you guys going to scale? Like, what's the next play? What are you guys working on? And that was always cool for us, is like every time we were at a shoot with a certain amount of people or the certain people, we looked at those as little meetings.
Right.
So now we're taking the advantage of like, okay, I got a big shoot with Joe today. Like, we're going to get into some business stuff. And I know there's been a few clients of ours who've helped us with ideas, and, we can't make all of them work always, but there's been a lot of ideas that came from you guys directly. And
I think what's cool is in this industry, right, us being real estate agents, our coworkers are the photographers, are the attorneys,
it's part of the team,
right? And we all work together, and it's like we've got to work together to help our client, right? Because yes, I'm your client, but I have a client which is really your client, and it's a big triangle.
We're all in the same team.
And when we see like sometimes like we'll have complaints or like the song choice or the little minute things that might be not so important maybe on the grand scheme of the house being sold, but a lot of times me and Jordan were able to pinpoint like that was their client that wants this. And so like, how do we make their client happier from the get-go? Like, so it's all just those little things, because at the end of the day, like, you guys want to get the home sold. You guys want to look, very professional. You guys want to, do your job the best that you can. And so if your client is upset about the music and you guys like the music, you don't care about the music. You want the music changed for them. So we knew that wasn't always the case of like, that that real estate agent being a pain. It was more like, okay, this client that they're working with might be the one that's a little a pain, but we just got to
say it over and over again. Job would be easy if it wasn't for the people.
Yeah, right. But that's what we got into when we're doing service businesses. So and that's why we liked it, is because we will be able to take it and take a punch and get up and just say, okay, how do I do better? Like that's our biggest strength with Jordan and I and Adam, is just being able to I've been ridiculed on the phone, like just saying crazy things by clients, just yelling at me, like whatever, like, and it's just like, okay, how, like, do you want money back? Like, what exactly do you want? And we'll be able to get it for you. And because then we're just going to roll. Like, we never want somebody to be able to hang up and say those guys are assholes. Right. It's always like, those guys fucked up maybe, but
admit it.
They handled it.
Move on,
because it's always about, I always thought about the conversations at dinner. Like, how are people going to talk about your business at dinner if they're asked about it, or if they're talking, because I've gotten calls at 6 o'clock and I've known like right after they're hanging up, they're probably going to hang out with their family. And if they're pissed off about something that I said or did, they're going to just bring it up to whoever they're with.
Well, that's the one thing about Buffalo. It's so small. Right. And it's 1 degree of separation. So if you're doing bad business.
Right. People know.
Yeah. And it gets spread around us.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And people talk.
And
you want them saying the right things, because that's where you're going to get the business.
Right.
Some businesses are short-sighted. I'm not going to give that refund. I'm going to stand on our refund policy.
Right.
Well, how much business are you going to lose?
Right.
In the long run.
And those are tricky lines to battle, because
you don't want to be taken advantage of,
exactly.
But you also want to be fair.
Right. And that's why it is a tricky line, but Buffalo's cool in that way, where you could, it's weird because everyone treats, even your partners like family, which is good and bad. Like, sometimes they don't pay you on time because it's like, oh, it's just those guys, it's my guys. Like, I'll pay them. But at the same time, it's like, well, you didn't pay, an invoice.
I got payroll.
Right.
Let's go. I got taxes.
Where it's like, I've noticed, like, once we've jumped in getting into that Florida market, it's a little different, because not many people are like that, which is good and bad. Like, right away, like, every single one of the Florida agents that we've worked with is, how do I pay? Like, let me pay you now, because they don't look at us as like family yet, or maybe they never will. So it's not like, I'll get you later.
It's definitely a different market.
So it's just a different feel, different vibe, but there's pros and cons to both. But it's always been cool. Like, we're born and raised in Buffalo, love Buffalo, and we will always have a business here, and it'll be our main business forever. So it's cool. It's just cool to see it all grow, and
so process. Take me through how you're doing so well in Buffalo to say, hey, let's take our show on the road and go to another city, especially when you don't know anybody there.
Right.
Like, you're starting over from scratch, a new branch. How was that, and what was challenging about that?
So back to what you were saying is working on the business versus in the business. For so many years, we were working in the business, on the business. We were doing everything. And as we kept hiring and training and doing all that, we felt like we were working in the business. We were perfectly at the spot we wanted to. We were doing a little bit of shoots. We were working on the business like every day. And, we kind of had this realization where it was like, okay, we don't work that great when it's just time to just sit there and work. Okay, what do we do today to work on the business?
You want to turn up the pressure a little bit?
Yeah, it's like, okay, like we could work on the website today, but we don't need to.
Right.
Should we? Or should we, so we found ourselves in this cycle, especially in the winter when we're slow and the weather sucks and it's cold and you're driving to the office and it's like, okay, like you have a lack of motivation.
Yeah, let's hang out with the boys.
Right, like let's just go to the office, let's
get some lunch.
So it was one of those realizations where, like, why don't we just go and test? This was, I think, last year before we went over there. It was we spent 9 weeks in Florida as like a test in the middle of the winter, and it was a test to see, one, if our employees and the business and everything could run without us being like on site, because for months before that we weren't even doing, we weren't really doing shoots. We were letting, the shooters do them because they make more money when they're doing shoots. So why are we going to go and step on their toes and do the shoots if they're going to be making less? And now they're like looking at it as a part-time job instead of a full-time career and, and all that stuff. So it was a test for us, a test for them, test for the whole business.
Yeah.
And we were still running the company. We were still in contacts with pretty much everyone every day. But we realized we didn't need to be at the office alone, just Jordan and I, to do what we were doing. So we went there, we had a little bit more motivation, the sunshine, all that little stuff kind of played factors into us being a little bit more motivated. Mm-hmm. And we liked that lifestyle and we liked how that felt. And we said, okay, now what if we were here and working on the business a little bit, but also trying to dip into this market? Why not just try to catch a little bit of this as well? And so we did a few shoots over there. We made a few connections and we just felt like it was the right move to let the business grow, because if me and Jordan were always there, Adam, what does Adam do, right? Like, how could he jump up next? How could Sarah jump up next? How could all the, how do they go forward? And like, what's the plan? Like, usually if you're in a job in a corporate structure, you have, 5 years here, you get this raise or you get this. And we didn't really have that type of structure yet so me and him kind of blocking that all because we were there, not really making much more money because we're in one market.
Yep.
And we kind of felt like we just needed to go to that other market to open up the floodgates for the employees to step up in the business, take bigger roles and do all that, as well as make some more money on this side of things so we could funnel it. And that's kind of where we're at now, is just trying to figure out ways to grow it, find roles. But that's why, too, when we started, before we did all this, we try to set it up in the systems that we were talking about, making sure people, the employees, know that this is not just a job that you have and then you're going to go get a big boy job or whatever. This is a job that could be a career. So we set up, 401ks with a 3% match. We set up healthcare, covering at least, some portion of that every month.
Right.
And we set up these things that a lot of these other companies and, even our accountant was like, I've never seen a company your size give a 3% match.
Yeah,
like,
incredible.
That's crazy. And so we just wanted to offer it to our employees. Like, this is not a place that you could just, style. We want you here and we want to grow with you. So for us to be able to leave, we didn't want them to get nervous of like us not looking at the company as much anymore, because it's, when you're in a snowstorm or, you got to drive to a shoot, and then you see the two owners, in Florida and chilling. Like, we didn't want people to be like,
you guys are golfing again today?
Yeah, like, so we're trying to do is really grow that business over there. And we just emphasize that over and over again, is like, guys, we're here because we want to grow this thing so you guys can make more money. We can make more money. We could grow. We could help more people. We could get more ideas. And that was what we did. So we also got our real estate license down there, and just to get our shoes, inside of a real estate agent's mind.
Yeah.
And just going through even just the training of that. And with that, we're not really even doing much. It's kind of just like using it as a tool, I would say. That's kind of what we tell people, is we're using it as a tool for whether it's people moving down to Florida, we could help them or referrals or whatever. But it was also just to get like, okay, how does it work when you put it in the MLS? What does the MLS look like? We've never logged into the MLS.
Yeah.
So how,
Oh, wow.
so how does that even look? So it's just opened up our minds and ideas of like, okay, what do real estates really need? Real estate agents, what do they need at what point? Like they sign a contract. Do they need the photos right away, or is this could we offer up a different service that helps them before photos? Or so it's just like just all sorts of we're always just thinking. And
what's the hardest part of going to another city that, let's just say, is a 3-hour flight away? Right? Like having virtually two businesses being the same in totally separate locations. Did you find some struggles and hurdles with that?
We still are. I mean, there's things like that I didn't know as a business. You think you know business, but you always get humbled in business real quick. Yeah. And that was just interesting. Where I didn't even know you had to file for a separate bit. Like you still are that business, but you have to file for that state.
In the state.
Because we got a letter like 2 months ago saying like, "Where's your Florida tax returns?" I'm like, "What?" Like that was something. So now it's like, okay, when you move to a different state, you need to register right away. So then, because now you're paying Florida tax and New York State tax depending on where you're making your money. And now you got to balance your earning sheets differently. And just the little back end things that I never even thought of. Like it was all in one sheet. This is what 360 made. Nope. You got to do Florida and you got to do Buffalo or New York and separate the two. And now you got two different books. And so that's a learning curve in itself, dealing with legalities.
When I was straight out of college, I opened up my first location, and I just put a sign on the building for the video game stores.
Yeah.
2 years later, I get a letter in the mail. You never pulled a permit for the sign. I'm like, oh, nobody told me.
Right.
How the hell do I know?
It's crazy.
I was just like a dumb 25-year-old that just like, I just wanted to run a business.
It's never as easy as you like. Even when I remember starting it was like, all right, we're gonna file the company and then we'll start right away. And it was like it took like 2 weeks. And like Jordan and I always like want to do things right by the book. So that little anxiety for us sometimes is like if I get a letter from the IRS about just the littlest thing, it's like, all right, what do I like? I freak out because I gotta solve it.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not supposed to be solved for weeks, and that's just how the IRS works. And so. They don't make it necessarily easy. It kind of makes us always like, man, I wish it was like the old days. I feel like it was easier when it was just cash and, things were just different. But you got to play by the rules, and that whole thing is crazy, especially if you're offering 401ks and doing all these things and you're starting to grow it because over 10 employees, it's different versus.
All of that, what you're saying,
it's crazy
stuff. The people who don't do that, they have no idea.
Right.
None of that's the fun stuff. Like seeing you guys down in Florida and being back behind the camera and in front of the camera.
Right.
Like your videos look so cool. And like you said, it could look like, oh, they're just having fun in Florida.
Right.
Just the things you're mentioning with the IRS. Mm-hmm. People have no idea like how much weight that puts on your shoulders to deal with this stuff. We got a letter actually last year or 2 years ago, and it said that we filed too late. And I had everything for my account. Like it was just simply wrong. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know, you couldn't get a hold of anyone, like didn't know what to do. And I had a client that happens to work for the IRS, and she was like, just send a letter stating this, and you have to mail it. It's the only way to get it to them. And then if you don't hear anything, you're okay. We were like, what?
Yeah.
How about you tell me that I'm good?
Please? No, we never heard anything about it again.
It's wild because I remember even just to register for Florida, I had called both states and I was talking to them. I had to get a letter of good standing from New York, but you can just email that. Of course you can't. You got to type up a letter of why you moved to Florida, why you want to start the business in Florida, and then you have to, go online. You have to fill X, Y, and Z this out, and then you have to fax it. I've never faxed anything in my life. You have to fax it to Albany, and then once it gets to Albany, they're going to email you a letter, but you have to request an email because if you don't request the email at the end of your little signature, they'll just mail it to you, and it takes 4 weeks long.
Oh my God!
So it's like these little things, and then I'm waiting at my, at the mailbox for a couple of weeks, and finally you get the email, and it's just crazy. And then Florida, it's like, okay, well, it's good standing, but you don't have this part of it, so you got to request this. So it's those little things that people don't realize, and that's why it's
well, and now growing to
tough.
The point where you're at, where you talk about having employees with 401ks and true careers.
Mm-hmm.
if something goes wrong or you fail,
Right.
now you're responsible for those employees and their families and their bills.
Exactly.
So it's not just like, oh, it's me and Jordan, we got some cash in the bag. Now it's like, we have a full functioning corporation here with people's lives at risk.
Yeah, and that's just like still sometimes it's like wild, but that's the fun part of it is like doing all that, but it's also very stressful that people don't realize. And going to Florida and all that, like the one thing too outside of like the legalities and all that is not having like the family and not having like the people that you could call. Like I remember when we were starting, we called our uncles and we're like, who do you know that could use this? Hey, what real estate agents do you know? Oh, hey, I'm Jordan Cinta. Like my uncle knows you. Like those little connections that kind of got us in the door early. You just don't have them. And then also
probably grew more as an entrepreneur and a professional, and even maybe in your personal life by moving away.
Definitely.
And not being able to have those phone calls and those connections, and you going out. And I got to be honest with you, I've never done it. Moved to another city or moved to another state. And I think it's probably one of the things I'm always going to regret is not putting myself out there and being comfortable in the bubble that I'm here in Buffalo.
Yeah,
to reach that full potential to grow.
That's truly why we did it, and we're blessed that we did it at the time we did because of people just can't. They have kids and they have X, Y, and Z, and those are the things that are really true factors of why they can't do things, and those are valid reasons. But for us, we looked at each other and we're like, why can't we?
Yeah, it's now or never, right?
And then so that was really we were comfortable, we loved it, but it's really just like, well, let's get uncomfortable again. And it sucks sometimes, but it's it's fun. At least we didn't pick another colder place to go. So at least that's one benefit.
You didn't go to Alaska or Canada?
No, but it's those are the things that force us. And now it's just like, okay. And another thing is timing was a huge factor of us growing here because no one's seen what we did. You go down there, and because we went down there last year, there's like 7 companies that are just like us,
right?
If not better in ways.
Sure.
So with similar prices, if not cheaper.
Wow.
So it's like, okay, whoa, how do we break into this market?
Wow.
So what we're doing is relying on us as human beings and thinking that that's going to be the difference maker is just connecting with people, showing who we are and showing, that we're genuine people. And, because, that's just what kind of helped us here is like, not just ads on Facebook, which we'll do.
Personal relationships.
It's building connections, going to, the Women's Council or the Women's Realtors Association, whatever that is, and just being a part of that and, getting into as many networking events that we can and just introducing us and saying, hey, if these people will like us because we're confident that they will like us, just be ourselves and show that we're just here to help them.
But it goes back to the initial thing that you would realize about landscaping. It goes back to the customer service aspect of it.
Right.
When we were talking about they're an extension of our teams, right? When we're working with a client. Mm-hmm. Kevin and I were talking earlier today about, if you and your seller as a real estate agent are not on the same page, like let's talk it out. Like we're a team, we're in this together. And it's the same with you guys. Like you mentioned, people reaming you out if they're not happy with something. Versus I think I could speak for us, the reason we've never veered away from you and always still will work together. If there's a vision I have or something I want to do, I talk to you about it. If something comes back to me that is not what I envisioned, you're always open to how can we make this work for Joe? And that sort of collaboration, that customer service, that's the sort of thing that will never go away.
Yeah, and that just takes time to prove too to people, right? Like in Buffalo, we have that now, which it took 7 years of doing that. And it's happened a little earlier when you started realizing that. But in the beginning, when you're down there, no one knows that. Yeah, right. No one knows you. No one cares.
And it takes time to prove yourself.
Right.
You just got to have that patience.
So you gotta almost have a client mess up, treat it right for them to be like, oh, these guys are honest and they're gonna help you. And we've done that a few times for people where it's like, hey, I'm so sorry, man. I need you in an hour. And we've had that in Florida, and it's like, boom, we're there. And that was always our strength starting here is we have me and Jordan. And with having both of us, I could be here, he could be there, And with no, we don't have crazy amounts of shoots right now there. We have that accessibility where some of those other companies who've been established more, like they can't meet them there in an hour.
Right.
So it's just taking advantage of just being able to pounce on every little opportunity, which is stressful. But if you just keep doing it and treat it, as a long-term play instead of just every day is like, okay, well, we have nothing on the calendar today. Like, what do we do? Like, why are we failing? Why is this not working? It's, me and Jordan know this is going to be a 5-year strategy play where we might not have an employee there for 3 or 4 years, hopefully sooner, but that it's just long term. That's just all we think about. And that's all we look at, and making sure that things are right on the short term, maybe for Buffalo. And we're still looking at Adam and, AJ, we're always talking about ideas, to grow it, even with Jack's help and Nick's help, Justin, the whole crew, Sarah with the headshots, like, how do we evolve? It's more of like, okay, instead of just coming here and doing as we say, we give them, and I know you know this, but like we give them control of their own schedule. We give them control of what they want to do. And, it's a little different from an employee to boss relationship than most places, but we think that's like kind of the new wave of like people wanting to work in businesses. Is
they want to feel like,
of course they want money, but it's more about their control and their lifestyle. Like people don't want to, it's crazy to say, but people don't want to have to ask somebody to take off.
Right.
And if you offer that in a way that helps both the business and you in a day-to-day way, it could work out. But I mean, how many people that don't work for themselves can just take off a full week without asking anyone?
Sure.
Right.
Like all of our employees can.
Right.
Awesome.
And so like it's coming down to helping out their lifestyle and working with them. And it's like, hey, I like real estate, but I've always liked portraits. I've always like, okay, let's get you the proper lens. Let's get you an extra space where we could have a studio for headshots. Let's start promoting it a little bit more. Let's talk to the people we know in the industry that could help you and sit down with you and talk to you about editing. And that's what we did with Sarah. And Jack likes to get a little bit more creative with his edits. So he's like, hey, I want to just go out there and shoot things. It's like, okay, any idea that you have that might be cool, go out, shoot it. And if you post it on our page with us, we'll pay you for that. So now it's a little extra. It's like, okay, if he's going shoot to shoot and has an idea of a drone video he wants to create for the city and edit out some things, like how could you get money for that? And those are like little ways that we're, trying to appease to all the employees.
Really allowing them to grow.
Right.
Before we wind things down, what are some things that you could tell people who maybe aren't in the real estate industry? Like, what are the services the 360 offers? What are you the best at? And what's to come moving forward?
So we do real estate photography, videography with drones, interior videos. We offer floor plans, Matterport tours, 3D Zillow tours, virtual staging, really anything that you need to market a home, we have. That's mainly what our go-to is. And then we branch out from there. We do wedding videography. We're getting into the wedding photography space and working with ML Studios on a lot of that stuff. Who's another great person that you guys could potentially interview. They basically are us, but for weddings. Okay. Very similar story. Young guy started it, have many employees, hired friends, some similar stuff. But, we basically just are like a one-stop shop for anything marketing related. And it mainly is for houses, but it also goes deeper. We've worked with, you guys on building personal brands and doing all that type of stuff too. But I would say our bread and butter is helping you get that house listed, sold, and having the clients be happy with how their house is represented, because it's an emotional, aspect of real estate. It's a quick aspect. It's an interesting aspect. And that's why a lot of photographers stay away from real estate, is because it's cheap. Agents don't want to expend crazy money. They know they have to do volume. And a lot of photographers that are good want to, do more of the portrait stuff and the stuff that makes them, the stuff that is more artistic and the stuff that makes them more money on the hour.
Right.
Yeah.
Where real estate is not like that. So that's why everyone that's talked to us about that is like, you guys should get into this. It's like, we are going here because no one wants to do it. So yeah, that's what we do.
But you guys are true trailblazers, and I can't say it enough. Like, you set the standard. Like when we're talking to a client about how we're gonna offer, we're going to take care of professional photography. One of the things I tell people, it's not just because it's the way I want it to look. It's now become the standard for when a buyer scrolling through houses.
Right.
If it doesn't look like 360 Views did the photos, the buyer who is behind a screen might not be as interested because you guys have set the standard. So I can't commend you enough for this. It's just an amazing story.
Thank you.
Well, I think you sitting here talking about your business and your passion, the excitement like showed through the entire time.
The wheels are always turning.
Cool. And I want to get into a space one day where I am able to grow the business, obviously, but help other younger or older entrepreneurs get into it, because there's a lot that you don't know and don't realize that Jordan and I, and we're going through that now, that we think that we could save a lot of people a lot of money, headaches, and time by just helping them. And that might be the long-term play of like, how can we, outside of 360 Views, grow our personal selves? And getting into that, there's a lot of satisfaction into helping other people do what they ultimately want to do, going against the grain. And if they feel it, that's where we've also helped a lot of people along the way, is like, hey, get out of that job if you don't like it, and if you can. And we've helped 3 or 4 people that we know start their businesses, which is cool.
That's awesome.
So those are things that we want to get into in the future, I would say.
Wow.
Well, appreciate you being on.
I don't think I even said his name, Tony Thomas. Thank you for being here. When I was just so excited talking
No
about
worries.
everything you guys have done that
I'm excited.
I don't even think
you
I
guys
properly
are awesome,
introduced
so.
you.
Look up 360 Views. Look up Tony and Jordan. Please like, share, comment, heart it.
Yeah.
But that's the latest episode of Let's Know Buffalo. Tony, thank you again for being here.
Thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
buddy.
I appreciate it. Absolutely. Great stuff.